rebuilt the suits and what was his motivation for doing so. Because ostensibly at the end of this movie, he's gotten rid of all of them so that he can, be closer to Pepper.
Yeah. And I think it really does just come down to, after he's gotten rid of all this stuff, he still says, I am Iron Man.
Yep.
And I'm Iron Man without the suits. I'm Iron Man without like that thing on my heart. Like, that's who I am. I am also Tony Stark. And just kind of taking possession. All right, this is going to be really lofty. He essentially takes possession of the Iron Man persona instead of the other way around.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is to say it, and so when he, and I think
he
there is something
owns
to be
it
said
rather
of,
than
like,
being encumbered by it.
Absolutely. And so when you own something, it's not unlike, when he is talking to Banner in the Avengers. And he's saying, like, you've been given this tremendous gift and you just keep fighting it. If you were to just give into it, great things might happen. And it's worth noting that, like, in that film, when Bruce turns into Hulk and doesn't want to, Hulk just takes over completely and, like, terrorizes people, including Black Widow. Only when he says, like, I'm always angry and willingly does this is he able to actually kind of control his actions. So like taking ownership of these things that could be a huge burden, but can also be used for tremendous good is a pretty common theme in these movies. And I think we see it at the very end of this one as well.
Yeah.
So then there's the twist.
Yeah, good. Let's talk about that a little bit.
All right, so we're going to spoil it now in case listeners don't know. So, I mean, if Iron Man has an arch nemesis, it is the Mandarin.
Absolutely.
And so, so it was only a matter of time before they did that character, and I understand why they didn't for a while, because the Mandarin is a character rooted very much in a certain type of
very uncomfortable stereotype.
Yeah. Which is like this Fu Manchu thing. And so it's like, all right, what are we going to do with this character? And I'll say this, if they had kept the character as he was portrayed by Ben Kingsley, like this guy who is kind of indeterminate, like ethnicity, but with a notable American accent, and sees himself as a teacher, but he is a terrorist, but he also might have the ability to, like, control other people. Like, it was really fascinating. I love that interpretation.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah. And with the twist, the big thing that I mourn is not like, oh my gosh, how could they do that to the Mandarin? What I mourn is like, I do like the direction they were taking him in, and now they're not going to, and that is a bummer. However, that twist is so fun.
It's absolutely
and exciting.
Hysterical.
And I don't know if I've ever seen Ben Kingsley be that funny.
Yeah.
And just, and it's unabashed. That's the thing. Like, they just steer right into it. Again, that's a very Shane Black type of thing, those scenes. And I understand why people get upset, but I also feel like it's kind of Marvel's way of saying, like, characters like that are rooted in this not even vaguely racist idea, like those don't really have a place here, so we'll change them. But that's the thing, is like the idea of the Mandarin, it plays with people's assumptions about terrorism, just as the old one capitalized on people's assumptions about, like, the mysticism of China,
which is interesting, because actually in the comics, all of his stuff is like based on alien technology.
Right. Which is, and I could see them not wanting to do that, although alien technology had already been introduced.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that hard. There was a digital short that was released with one of the Blu-rays. I can't remember which one, where now Trevor Slattery is in prison, and there's this hint that there may actually be a real Mandarin out there.
Yeah. Which is like, okay, so you want to leave that open for yourself, but, and I get it, but at the same time, like, what an odd coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of odd when you think about it.
But yeah, I think it gives Ben Kingsley a lot of fun stuff to do on either side. And I think it does. I'll talk about my political problems with it in a moment, but it kind of gives this idea that's like, yeah, things aren't always so easy. Like if this guy were just a terrorist, then it's like, all right, we just got to kill that terrorist. But then it turns out that a much more devious character who has a lot to gain from people's fear is capitalizing on that. And so I think I like that idea. Here's the problem. There's a couple of them. One, I'm a huge fan of Guy Pearce, but I feel like he wasn't given that much to work with. Which is a pretty standard thing for Marvel villains, but I feel like the corporate Iron Man villains before this have been pretty good. Like I thought Jeff Bridges was great, Sam Rockwell. But both of them are very quirky actors. And Guy Pearce can be, but isn't very often. He's usually pretty straightforward. And I think that is unfortunate. The other thing that bothers me, and this is a political thing, which I feel perfectly fine in saying because I saw the film, to go back to earlier. I don't have any problem with people having a political beef with a movie, provided they've seen the film and can elaborate. But one thing that did bother me is that there comes a moment when Guy Pearce is talking about, like, you know, like these monsters like the Mandarin or Bin Laden or whatever it is, like these ready-made villains. And I remember thinking, like, maybe let's not bring an actual terrorist monster into this. And also, because they do that, it's like, okay, well, now I can extrapolate larger things. And it's like, so the villain again is this corporate guy. And I understand that you want villains that are going to be kind of the dark mirror image of Tony. I get that. But at the same time, sometimes a terrorist is just a terrorist. Yeah. Sometimes there are people that have an ideological difference with the West, and they want to destroy it. It's not... I feel like it's actually a little bit condescending and maybe a bit patronizing of... I was going to say of terrorists, but of like Easterners, people that aren't from the West. That's like, well, they couldn't do this themselves. That must be some kind of front for like a real devious Westerner, and that bothered me. Like, just practically that it just comes back to like the evils of corporate America again. Yeah. So I think that just kind of, there was a moment when it seemed as though Aldrich Killian was a servant of the Mandarin, and that was actually really exciting to me. I liked the idea of that. So that's something that bothered me thematically. It's not enough to bother me ultimately. I still really like the movie, but it is not without its flaws.
Definitely. But if you look at it, and if you're willing to be a little more open-minded about it, I think many of the commonly cited flaws do tend to fall away a little bit on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is like a lot of the commonly cited flaws are things that I think are tremendous strengths, you know? And so this goes back to what I was saying initially, is like keeping Tony out of the suit, having him ultimately reject a lot of iconography at the end, including the little arc reactor in his chest, having the Mandarin be this other thing. The willingness to annoy and frustrate fans is something, it is genuinely risky. And I think it's the first step. You know, it's something I noticed last year. When I saw Doctor Strange, I noticed that the Marvel logo at the beginning was no longer pages flipping. it would then said Marvel Studios,
Right,
and it was just images from the other films.
You know what? One thing that I really miss from Phase 2 is the fanfare from the beginning, and they changed it.
Yes.
And that the older fanfare in my mind is it's a really stirring, epic piece of music, and the
Yes.
newer one isn't anywhere close to as strong. I miss the old one.
And so I do think that Marvel Studios has, they'll they'll kind of tip their hat to big things from the comics, but I think they've slowly but surely tried to move away from that. And I feel like the Mandarin thing might be the first time they really do that. They say, like, we're going to do things our own way. It's going to make some of the comic book, I'm not going to call them fanboys, like people like comic books, that's fine. But we're not making this for them. We're making this for us, and we're a different thing. Like, the comic book Mandarin is still is there. You can always go back and see him. We're going to do our own thing over here.
And it's gonna serve our larger narrative in a far more effective way.
Right. And so I think that even if I didn't necessarily like the outcome, which happens from time to time with Marvel movies, I almost always appreciate the audacity behind it. And there's plenty in this. There's plenty of in this franchise that is not audacious at all.
Right.
But this is such an unheard of thing what Marvel's been doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's revolutionary.
We've seen
it's
sequels
in all of cinema.
Yeah. And what's fun is that it's going to stay unique. DC is fizzling out. They got rid of that dark universe thing. There was talk of the Ghostbusters universe. Like, a lot of different franchises were going to do it, but none of them seemed to do it well. And so it seems as though Marvel didn't kick off a trend. It is the trend. It's the only thing that is doing it well. And I think it has to do with a tremendous amount of patience on the part of Kevin Feige to not just jump into things too quickly.
I haven't seen Justice League yet, and I'm not going to go to the theaters for it because after Suicide Squad, which I also didn't see in the theaters, I watched it on an airplane. After that, I was pretty much done, and I had hopes for Wonder Woman, and I'm going to talk in a little bit more at a little more length on that film in a upcoming episode. But even that one, to me, and I know a lot of people sort of hailed Wonder Woman as this, amazing film, and it's okay, but it's not amazing.
I think it's an amazing character. I think it's an amazing character treated well. It's amazing how if you just lock into a character and you develop that character well, that can carry people through. But like the story of Wonder Woman is really not that exciting. Well, and it's there are exciting sequences, but
I think I think I've said this in in an episode that I recorded before this that's not going to come out for a while now. But I feel like there's a lot of pressure to say that Wonder Woman is a great movie just because it's the first female-led superhero film.
Sure. I think there is pressure for that, and the number of people that's like, "Oh my gosh, it's perfect." It's like, really? Because that final,
oh my gosh,
that final boss battle,
nonsensical.
It's no different than any other. Yeah, no different than any other cosmic battle from Marvel movies. Like, it still falls into the same traps of any other superhero. It's just, I found the character to be refreshing because she's not dark and brooding, and she actually seems to have a genuine affection for people.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a revolutionary thing in the DCEU.
Yeah, and even in Marvel, like the closest you can come is Captain America, who was actually more generally patriotic, whereas Wonder Woman really does seem to have a love and affection for individuals, whether they've met them or not. Like, she understands the importance of each individual, and that's something that I found very refreshing. Certainly in the DCU, but DCEU, pardon me. But in general,
a couple episodes from here, I'm actually going to have a conversation with a lady about Wonder Woman, and about how that film actually presents a lot of really excellent aspects of biblical womanhood.